I still remember the sound of the coffee mug shattering on the kitchen floor. It wasn't dramatic because someone threw it. It slipped from my hand after I heard the two voices coming from the patio. One belonged to my fiancé, Daniel. The other belonged to my best friend, Ava. I had come home early with takeout because Daniel had texted me that he wasn't feeling well. I imagined soup, a blanket, and a quiet evening together. Instead, I found the sliding door slightly open, their laughter drifting inside like it belonged in my home. I almost feel guilty, Ava whispered. Daniel laughed softly. You know Emma believes everyone. She's the easiest person to fool. My chest tightened so violently I thought I might faint. I mean, Ava continued, she actually thanked me for helping plan the wedding. I know. Their laughter mixed together. Every invitation, every flower arrangement, every late-night planning session, all of it had been shared with the woman sleeping with the man I loved. I wanted to burst outside, scream, demand answers. Instead, I stayed frozen. Years earlier my grandmother had once told me, never interrupt people while they're revealing who they truly are. For the first time, I understood exactly what she meant. I quietly stepped backward before they noticed me. I picked up my purse, left the food on the counter, and drove away with tears blurring every traffic light. That night I didn't call Daniel. I didn't text Ava, I simply watched. The next morning Daniel arrived carrying flowers. Baby, he said, kissing my forehead, I'm sorry I slept so much yesterday. I looked into the eyes of the man who had practiced lying until it sounded effortless. It's okay, I smiled. The smile surprised even me. Because in that moment I realized something. Anger fades. Evidence doesn't. Over the next 3 weeks I became the woman nobody noticed. Daniel believed I had become sweeter because wedding stress was finally ending. Ava thought I appreciated her even more. Neither realized I had stopped trusting every word they said. Instead, I listened. Daniel started leaving his laptop unlocked around me. He assumed love meant blindness. One evening he went to shower after dinner. His phone buzzed beside me. A notification flashed. Ava heart. Miss you already. No attempt to hide it. No coded language. Just confidence. I opened the conversation. Months. Pictures. Plans. Jokes about me. One message made my stomach twist. When the wedding gifts arrive, don't worry. Half of that furniture will end up in our apartment anyway. Daniel replied with a laughing emoji. I couldn't breathe. They weren't only stealing my relationship. They were planning to steal the future my parents had spent years helping me build. I quietly sent every message to my own secure cloud account before placing the phone exactly where it had been. When Daniel returned, wrapped in a towel, he smiled. What are you thinking about? I met his gaze. How lucky I am. He grinned. I know. That answer hurt more than the affair itself. Because he truly believed I would never leave. The following weekend Ava insisted we have brunch. She hugged me tightly. You look happier lately. I am. She squeezed my hand. You deserve everything wonderful. If hypocrisy had a face, it would have looked exactly like hers. She spent the meal asking about honeymoon destinations while secretly texting Daniel beneath the table. I noticed because her smartwatch mirrored every notification. She had forgotten to disable previews. Their confidence was becoming my greatest advantage. I didn't expose them. Not yet. Instead, I accepted every invitation. Game nights. Double dates with friends. Wedding tastings. Family. Dinners. I became the quiet observer collecting pieces of a puzzle they believed no one else could see. Then fate handed me something even bigger. Daniel's older sister, Claire, accidentally called me instead of him. I found the investment papers, she said. Dad still thinks Emma's inheritance will solve Daniel's debt. I stayed silent. Claire frowned. Daniel. No, I answered softly. It's Emma. The silence that followed felt endless. Oh, what debt? Claire inhaled sharply. He didn't tell you. No. Another pause. Finally she whispered, Emma, don't sign anything he puts in front of you. The call ended. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Debt. Inheritance. Suddenly every conversation about combining finances, every suggestion that my late grandmother's trust should be merged after the wedding, every rushed appointment with lawyers made horrifying sense. Daniel hadn't only betrayed my heart. He had chosen me because he needed what my family had left me. That evening he wrapped his arms around me while we cooked dinner. Only 6 weeks until we're married, he whispered. I stirred the sauce without looking at him. 6 weeks can change everything. He chuckled, assuming I meant excitement. If anything changes, he said confidently, it'll only be for the better. I smiled again. This time the smile felt different. Not forced. Focused. Because the woman who would have cried, begged, or confronted them had disappeared the day I heard laughter through that open patio door. In her place stood someone patient enough to let two people destroy themselves with the very lies they believed would protect them, while I quietly prepared a future neither of them could possibly see coming.
Ethan never took his eyes off my face. Stay with me, Claire. Don't close your eyes. The doorbell rang again. This time it was followed by a firm knock. Open the door. A man's voice echoed through the hallway. Dad's face drained of every trace of confidence. Mom grabbed Melissa's arm so tightly she winced. Don't answer it, Mom whispered. Ethan glared at them. Are you out of your minds? He reached for his phone with one hand while keeping the other pressed against my bleeding stomach. I've already called 911. The knocking grew louder. This is the sheriff's office. Open the door. Dad staggered backward. They weren't supposed to come today. My head spun from the pain, but those words cut through the haze. Weren't supposed to. Melissa's lips trembled. Mom shot her a warning look. Say nothing. Ethan stared at them in disbelief. What have you done? No one answered. The front door suddenly swung open. Our neighbor, Mrs. Harper, had apparently unlocked it after hearing the screaming outside. Two sheriff's deputies rushed in behind her, followed by a woman in a gray business suit carrying a leather folder. The deputies took one look at me lying in a pool of blood. Nobody move. Dad instinctively raised his hands. It was an accident. One deputy looked at Ethan. What happened? My father-in-law punched my pregnant wife. Her mother attacked her too. The deputy's expression hardened instantly. The woman in the gray suit slowly looked around the room before her eyes settled on my parents. So, she said quietly, I arrived just in time. Mom's knees nearly gave out. The woman introduced herself. My name is Rebecca Lawson. I'm a court-appointed forensic accountant. I frowned, barely able to stay conscious. A forensic accountant? What did that have to do with any of this? Rebecca opened her folder. I've been investigating financial abuse involving the Whitmore family for the past 6 months. Dad's mouth opened. You have no right. I have every right. She removed several documents. 3 anonymous reports claimed that your oldest daughter had been systematically deprived of assets left to her by her late grandmother. I blinked. My grandmother. Rebecca looked at me with visible sympathy. You didn't know. It wasn't a question. I shook my head weakly. My grandmother left everything to Mom. Rebecca slowly turned another page. No. The room fell silent. Your grandmother rewrote her will 11 months before she passed away. Mom closed her eyes. Rebecca continued. She divided her estate equally between both granddaughters after discovering years of favoritism. I couldn't breathe. What? The estate included investment accounts, trust funds, and a lakeside property. I stared at my mother. You told me Grandma died broke. Mom refused to meet my eyes. Rebecca nodded. That was false. Dad suddenly shouted, This has nothing to do with tonight. It has everything to do with tonight, Rebecca replied. According to bank records, the money belonging to Claire was quietly transferred into accounts controlled by Melissa over several years. Melissa burst into tears. I didn't ask for it. Rebecca calmly pulled out another document. Actually, you signed every transfer. Melissa stopped crying. The deputies exchanged glances. Rebecca wasn't finished. We also recovered text messages. She looked directly at Melissa. If Claire has a baby first, she'll never fight us over the inheritance because she'll be distracted. My stomach twisted despite the pain. Melissa whispered, You hacked my phone. No, your former fiancé voluntarily provided a backup after learning how you treated your sister. I remembered. Daniel. He had disappeared from Melissa's life without explanation nearly a year earlier. She'd claimed he was controlling. Now I wondered how much of that had been another lie. Rebecca read another message aloud. Mom says once I have the first grandchild, everyone will forget Claire anyway. Nobody spoke. The silence was suffocating. Then another sentence. If she loses the baby, maybe that's fate. Ethan's entire body shook with rage. You knew. He looked from Melissa to my parents. You all planned this. Mom screamed, We never planned violence. Rebecca closed the folder. No, but years of manipulation have consequences. The ambulance crew rushed through the front door. One paramedic immediately knelt beside me. We need to move her now. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I grabbed Ethan's sleeve. Our baby. His eyes filled with tears, but he forced a hopeful smile. We're not giving up. The ambulance doors slammed shut moments later. Sirens wailed as we sped toward the hospital. Every bump in the road sent agony through my body. I kept talking to my unborn child inside my mind. Please, stay with me. Please don't leave me. Doctors flooded the emergency room the second we arrived. Bright lights passed overhead as they rushed me through endless hallways. Someone kept repeating my name. Someone else asked about allergies. Then everything faded. When I finally opened my eyes again, the room was quiet. Machines beeped softly beside me. For one terrifying second, I was too afraid to ask. Ethan noticed I was awake. He immediately stood and took my hand. His eyes were red from crying. I searched his face. Our baby. He smiled through tears. The heartbeat is still there. I broke down completely. Relief crashed over me so hard I could barely breathe. The doctors explained that I had suffered severe trauma, but somehow our little fighter had survived. I kissed Ethan's hand over and over. For the first time since the attack, I allowed myself to believe we might actually have a future. Then there was another knock. Not loud, gentle. Rebecca Lawson stepped into the room. There are a few things you deserve to know. She placed another folder on my bedside table. I wasn't investigating your parents because of the inheritance. I frowned. Then why? She took a slow breath. Because someone hired me. Who? Rebecca gave me a small, knowing smile. The person who rang your doorbell tonight wasn't just following up on an investigation. She slid a faded photograph from the folder. The moment I saw the woman's face, my heart stopped. She looked almost exactly like my late grandmother. Only younger, only alive. Rebecca spoke softly. Claire, before you decide what to do next, you need to know the truth about the woman you've believed was dead for the last 25 years. My hands trembled so violently that Ethan had to steady the photograph for me. The woman smiled warmly at the camera, her arm wrapped around my grandmother. On the back, written in my grandmother's familiar handwriting, were the words, "My daughters, Evelyn and Grace. Together forever." I stared at Rebecca. My grandmother only had one daughter. Rebecca gently shook her head. No, she had two. My heartbeat quickened. Grace was the older sister. Evelyn was your mother. I looked back at the photograph, unable to understand. Then, who is Grace? Rebecca's expression softened. The woman your mother told everyone had died in a car accident 25 years ago. A chill ran through me. She didn't die. No. Rebecca took a slow breath. She left after discovering your parents had forged financial documents and manipulated your grandmother for years. Before she could report them, they spread the story that she had abandoned the family. Eventually, everyone believed she was gone. I covered my mouth. So, she's alive. Rebecca smiled. She's been alive this entire time. Just then, another gentle knock came from the hospital doorway. An elderly woman stepped inside with silver hair, kind eyes, and a quiet dignity that filled the room before she spoke. The second our eyes met, something inside me shifted. She looked at me with tears streaming down her cheeks. Oh, Claire. I didn't know why, but I immediately reached for her. She hurried to my bedside and held my hand as if she'd waited decades for that moment. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I tried to find you. I couldn't stop crying. Your Grace. She nodded. I promised your grandmother I'd protect you one day. I just arrived a few minutes too late. She gently brushed my hair away from my face. I heard everything the deputies recorded in that house. For several moments, neither of us spoke. It felt strangely peaceful, like finding a missing piece of my life I never knew existed. Over the next several weeks, the truth unraveled faster than I could have imagined. The deputies' body cameras had captured my parents screaming, "The first grandchild must be hers," moments before they attacked me. Our dining room security camera, one Ethan had installed months earlier after several packages had gone missing, recorded the entire assault from beginning to end. There was no denying what happened. The recording spread through every courtroom hearing. Family friends who had defended my parents for years sat in stunned silence. Neighbors who once called me the difficult daughter finally understood why I had kept my distance. But the greatest shock came from people who had worked with my grandmother before she passed away. One after another, they came forward with journals, letters, and handwritten notes. Every page told the same heartbreaking story. She had seen the favoritism. She had argued with my parents. She had begged them to love both daughters equally. In her final journal entry, she wrote, "If Claire ever reads this, I hope she knows none of this was her fault. Some people mistake control for love. I pray she never does." I cried harder reading those words than I had during the attack. Because someone had finally said what I'd needed to hear my entire life. Months later, the criminal case concluded. The evidence spoke louder than any excuse. My parents were held fully accountable for the assault and the years of financial fraud that followed. Melissa's signed transfers and messages made it impossible for her to claim ignorance. The court ordered that every dollar belonging to me be restored, along with the income it should have earned over the years. When reporters gathered outside the courthouse, microphones stretched toward me. "Do you hate your family?" I looked toward the building where my parents had disappeared through the courthouse doors. For a long moment, I remembered birthdays where my presents had been given to Melissa. School plays where my seat was empty because they never came. Graduation day. My wedding. The night they chose jealousy over my child. Then I answered, "I don't hate them." The reporters waited. I simply refused to carry what belongs to them anymore. It wasn't forgiveness. It was freedom. A few months after the trial, Ethan and I welcomed our daughter into the world. The moment I held her, every promise I'd ever made to myself became real. She would never wonder if she was enough. She would never have to earn our love. She would never compete with another child for affection. Grace stood beside me in the hospital room, smiling through happy tears. "Have you chosen a name?" I nodded. "We're naming her Hope." Grace covered her face and cried. "Your grandmother would have loved that." Life slowly settled into something I had never experienced before. Peace. The inheritance funded a foundation in my grandmother's name that provided emergency legal and financial assistance to adults escaping abusive family control. Watching people rebuild their lives from situations that once felt impossible reminded me that justice isn't only about exposing wrongdoing. It's also about creating opportunities for healing. One autumn afternoon, Ethan and I took little Hope to the lakeside property that had always been meant to be part of my future. Golden leaves drifted across the water. Hope laughed as Ethan lifted her toward the sky. Grace sat nearby, knitting quietly with a smile that never seemed to leave her face anymore. I watched the people beside me and realized something beautiful. The family I'd spent my entire childhood begging for had never truly existed. But the family standing beside me now was real. Built on honesty instead of fear. On kindness instead of comparison. On love instead of conditions. As the sun began to set, my phone vibrated. It was an unknown number. I opened the message. It contained only one sentence. "Can you ever forgive us?" There was no signature. There didn't need to be one. I looked at Hope chasing butterflies across the grass with Ethan pretending he couldn't catch her. I thought about the years that had been stolen from me. Then I quietly locked my phone without replying. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I wanted the last word. But because silence was finally the answer they had spent a lifetime teaching me. For the first time, it no longer hurt. I turned away from the past, picked up my daughter, and walked toward the people who had chosen to love me. This time, no one asked me to compete for my place. I already belonged.